know I'm only on one day a week. I get it. I'm going to have to jump on GarageBand and start sawing something together. This is the House Bar Show. Wow. And a guitar note, and then progressive and all that. Yeah, it's going to be good.
Hey, Hal, did you mean something like this?
This is the House Bar Show. Wow. And a guitar note, and then progressive and all that. Yeah, it's going to be good.
The Hal Sparks radio program, mega worldwide.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
We're just getting warmed up.
I know. And we got to take a break because we're out of time for this segment.
Yeah, that break just took us into the other break.
That's right. We got some callers on the line. Who do we have, Chicago?
Up first is Steve from the Gold Coast.
Oh, right on. Hold on.
Thank you for taking my call.
Absolutely,
hello.
Steve. Welcome.
Hello.
Glad you're here.
Great. Yes, thank you. Thank you for taking my call. And I wanted to offer up a hypothesis that I think strings together a couple of different things that you brought up here. And I think that part of the reactionary response that you're seeing from a lot of these Trump followers is a response to what we've seen that government can do, especially here in America in the midst of the COVID crisis. So we've seen that, government can actually take care of people and can help them pay their bills, can keep them housed and keep them fed during a crisis. And I think that they're scared to death, a certain cohort in this country, because it opens up the door to the possibility of what government can do for people.
Right.
And God forbid that after this is over, people should start to say, so you know what? I mean, is it really necessary that my wife and I should work 60, 70 hours a week to get by in America?
Right.
Never being able to take a vacation. Our kids go to, moderately decent schools. We're never going to be able to buy a home. All of these things are questions that Americans might start to ask themselves about the role of government, because we've got generations of people who grew up after the New Deal. Right. And after those policies started to be eroded by the right, because they've been chipping away at that for decades.
Right.
And they sort of grew up in an America where mom and dad, it was no big thing that dad worked 70 hours a week. There was a time when dad worked 40 hours a week.
Right.
And he actually made more money than what mom and dad make today as a combined salary.
Well, there is I will argue that there is a resource availability aspect of where that work goes and and why people work for more stuff than they ever have before. And you can debate the value of, say, home computers, smart television sets, the Apple Watches, and the fact that your phone has more technology on it than sent us to Mars. That's one of the reasons why, and that's a choice, and that's cool. That's fine. But the bare subsistence level should be such that it doesn't require breaking your back to get there. That's, I think, where we go. Right. If you want to strive and earn more because that's what you want more stuff, that should be an option and not the absolute baseline.
Right, and that's a really good point, because all too often we get caught up in this discussion about the exploitation of the free market and capitalism in terms of what it does to labor. But the other side of that, and again, it gets short shrift, is that what that free market does in terms of incentivizing people to buy a lot of nonsense that, quite frankly, they don't need. How much of our lives do we spend working for a bunch of junk that we are convinced that we need, when really the only person that benefits are the people selling it to you? And in terms of your life, it really has very little value to the human condition.
Well, I think I will land soundly on the being a grown man who has far more than my fair share of action figures and vinyl records. I will land solely forever on, if you make it, you can spend it on whatever you want, and if you drive yourself crazy, earning money to so that you can buy an increasingly impressive version of the Iron Man suit you can wear to Comic-Con every year, when it isn't materially changing the outcome of your overall life, but you do it because it brings that whole pursuit of happiness part, you're welcome to it. If you find yourself chasing the dollar for food, that's when the government has a part to play in stepping in. If you want to run yourself ragged for material comforts, if you're Elvis and your idea of what you do with all the money you make as Elvis Presley is a gold toilet, I don't understand it, but I won't stand between you and doing it. It's weird, but knock yourself out.
That goes back. And that goes back to.
Yeah.
Right, and that goes back to exactly what I was trying to point out.
Yeah.
And that, nobody's talking about government giving you a mansion and a
Right.
choice between a Mercedes and a BMW. But we're talking about government keeping people alive.
Yeah.
Health care, education, decent housing. Nobody's buying you a mansion. And also, I think that you also raised a really good point, because I think we get stuck on that old definition, that sort of late 19th century definition of capitalism and the free market.
Right.
Because as you pointed out, you can become a billionaire. You and three buddies can come up with an app, and somebody will buy it, and you're a billionaire. You didn't exploit anybody. You didn't.
It came out of nowhere. It doesn't even even need material resources to exist as a product. That was something completely unheard of. I mean, the only thing even close was books for a long time, because it was the idea within them, not the paper itself. But you still needed the material resource to do that. You can now write a book that is as big as the Encyclopedia Britannica, and it takes up no material space, and you can sell it for $1,000.99, and it is completely up to anybody who wants it and whoever wants to have access to it. It is totally different in our current living system, and what we should be concerned with, I think, from a governmental level, and I think what you're right about, your main point about the Republicans fearing, is that what if we give people who have been traditionally held back economically by the resource economy that was in control for a long time, and they somehow slingshot ahead with this new economy that doesn't require any resources. They get a computer, or they get broadband that they can get, and it's up to them to find their way to the better computer that allows them to do whatever. And they end up being, a streamer, or they end up, creating a program using the computers at school that they end up selling and making a living. And they never had to be born on oil or gold or diamonds. They can bypass the wealth, the old school wealth that was based on that resource economy, simply through their own ingenuity, something that was materially impossible before, because if you wanted to make millions of dollars publishing a book, you had to find somebody willing to cut down some trees, shave them into paper, and, it's not how it works, I'm kidding, but and put it out for you, and make sure, and truck it to stores.
Right, and the big unknown here going forward, and it's an important part of this discussion, is technology. Because what happens down the road? Because we all know what AI is. At least I hope people do. Mm-hmm. And then couple that with robotics and the advancements there. So what happens when you can grow all the food that you would need in a society without a human being ever having touched it until it gets to their mouth?
Wait till you start eating meat that never was alive. There are 3 companies, including an Israeli company and a California company, that are growing meat in petri dishes that will have the same mouthfeel as regular meat. You'll be able to sell it in supermarkets. Nobody will be the wiser, and it'll also be infused with vitamins. Won't affect the flavor. You'll have like super beef, and you'll be eating mammoth burgers, and it's gonna anything that have a tiger sausage. Nobody cares. It didn't come from a living tiger. It's that stuff is on the way. I'm dead serious, and it will require so much less to process that you won't have these giant cattle farms that produce methane. That you will have hydroponic fields that can recycle their own water.
And then, right, exactly. And then the whole notion about, we're paying for other people. Well, what happens when things cost so little? And especially that, it's not as if there's some other guy doing the work so that you can eat and have a good time.
Right.
No, there's a machine doing it for next to nothing. So then the argument becomes, well, then who is it hurting if we provide a baseline of a subsistence in terms of, again, health care, education, food, housing, because we can produce basic housing, but through all of this technology. It's not some guy over there killing himself 12 hours a day to build your house for you while you're enjoying life. No, it's machines doing it. So then why not be able to do it? But I think that a lot of people in this country are scared to death that is going to turn on its head the existing paradigm. And
well, that's because they come from largely those groups of people you're talking about come from a long line of people who made their wealth in the resource economy and don't believe in ideas and science on that level, can't get a grasp on it and fear that their control of the economy, their control of human beings' lives is slipping out of their hands. And that is right. There will be a shift coming. Like, I have, and it's interesting, Steve, that you are kind of dovetailing us into today's happy ending, because it relates to a lot of this, once we get to the next break. But I have a question for you though, because we kind of touched on this before, but when I filled in for Joan, but the idea that the resources in Afghanistan are not there to motivate anybody to stay in Afghanistan the way, oil in Iraq necessarily drove that conflict. And so the question is, why stay? Why are we there? And how do we best help? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Exactly. And it's important to remember, because you pointed this out, and I think it was really insightful. Up until the last few decades, what was in Afghanistan, quite frankly, didn't interest anybody. Going back millennia, armies got to Afghanistan, the whole, it's the graveyard of empires. Oh, look, let's be a little bit more honest than that. People got there, as you said, and looked around and said, this isn't worth fighting for.
Right.
This isn't Greece, for God's sake. It's not Egypt. There are places in the world worth fighting for. This isn't one of them. Mm-hmm. But now, in the 21st century, there are elements and there are natural resources in Afghanistan that today have utility that were useless when the Soviets were in Afghanistan. Nobody cared, quite frankly. There wasn't that kind of demand. There wasn't a PC in everybody's home, and there wasn't a mobile phone and whatnot, and all of this technology that ran your home and your car and everything else.
Lithium.
Today, Afghanistan does have these things, and now there's a utility for extracting that. But you don't need to go to war to do it. People are kind of funny, no matter what religion or what ethnic background they are. They are incentivized by the idea of buying things from them that they have to sell you. Mm-hmm. And that's all that we need to do to change the physical conditions on the ground in Afghanistan. Extract what they have there. Let those people sell us what they have. Let them improve the quality of their life. And guess what? Social change will come. I'm not saying it's going to come overnight, but it's a heck of a lot better way to institute change than to bomb people into changing.
Right. Well, and also the unfortunate part for anybody who has that plan for Afghanistan is that we're about 2 years away. You're about a year and a half away from being able to get it out of the ground the way you want to in any kind of massive way out of Afghanistan, and about 2 years away from that those elements that you're seeking to get out of the ground being obsolete. Because that's the other problem. Right. That's the same thing the Saudis are having with oil. Everybody tries to resuscitate oil prices like crazy, but the reality is the tipping point has come for electric vehicles for the vast majority of the people who are buying vehicles in the future, and we have literally crested that hill, and it is all downhill for consumers to use oil or gas from now on. It is going to be electric. Now, airplanes, they'll still need some, but minor usage.
Right, and the important thing is that unlike other industries, so if for instance people stop eating McDonald's tomorrow, great, you can turn it into a Starbucks, no problem. But a lot of these other industries, they invested in multi-billion-dollar endeavors. So when you have an offshore drilling rig that costs $20 billion, you need to recoup that, and you were hoping to do it over the next 30 years. Well, if you all of a sudden decide, that oil is not the way we're going to be going any longer, how do you recoup that?
Right.
You've got to maintain that oil paradigm in order to recoup that money. Otherwise, it's lost, because that was your idea.
We are about 6 years to 10 years away, depending on which countries get on board the fastest, to the international trade in wine in gallons and in availability and price overtaking oil permanently. That for like the amount of wine being shipped back and forth around the world will be higher than the amount of oil that is being shipped and processed for jet fuel and some other fuel sources.
And that's the conundrum that a lot of these countries face, because on the one hand, if you overproduce, it it forces down the prices of oil. But if you decide to overproduce, then rather if you overproduce, it pushes down the price. If you underproduce, then they're afraid that 10 years from now you're just left with a ground full of stuff that nobody wants any longer.
That's
because
right.
you lost your chance to sell it. It's like a horse-drawn carriage. You know, nobody's interested in buying your horse-drawn carriage in 2021.
That's right, and unless you're in parts of Pennsylvania, I suppose. But look for, by the way, financially over the next 5 years, a lot of oil-related pump and dump schemes where the price of oil is artificially raised, or at times when gas prices go up because people are traveling more, for there to be this high rise in oil commodities, and then they just get out quickly and it's going to get more, oil will get more volatile over the next 5 years as it basically moves its way out of the consumer automobile market in every major way, in the European market, in the United States market, and in and all the diesel trucks that are still running in South America going up and down hills on unpaved roads are all going to run on French fry grease after a while, because it won't be available, because they won't bother to bring it there, because it won't be worth the price of shipping it. That's, I mean, and then electrical vehicles, and then
at some point.
That's
right,
where,
exactly. At some point, you're wondering where the gas station was that you used to fill up, and you realize, well, now there isn't one, and
right.
there isn't one down the road either.
That's right.
What's the use of that car that you have? So yeah, you're absolutely
exactly.
right.
And then we're going to be the big recycling and pollution stuff that comes with all these dead cars sitting all over the world. I appreciate it. We got to take a break because we're running out. We went way through that break as well, but it was a good conversation, and it brings us into our happy ending. So on the other side of this, there is some good news in terms of where we're headed, and it kind of relates to what we were talking about on a geopolitical front, on a technological front, and on an environmental front. And it's actually very positive, and hopefully will make you guys feel better. We'll be back right after this.